The sikha that we will be learning is the sikhas chelik tes, the first sikha for Parshas Ekev. V'hoya Ekev tishmun, on these words, v'hoya Ekev tishmun, which simple pshat means, v'hoya Ekev, it'll be because you will listen to Hashem. Hashem promises all the different brachas he says later. But Taich Rasha says a different pshat. Rasha says that the word Ekev also has a meaning of the heel. And the Pasuk is telling us, Im ha-mitzvahs kales she'odam dosh ba'akev tishmun. When does the Eibishter promise all these brachas? If those mitzvahs sound like light mitzvahs, and a person steps on them with his heel, if you will listen to those, then Hashem will keep for you all the brachas, etc., etc. So he teaches the word Ekev from the lashon of a heel, and the pasuk is saying that you should listen to those mitzvahs that a person steps on with his heel, which are very light mitzvahs. Their makir from them pirush is in Medrash Tanchuma. The source of Rashi is in Medrash Tanchuma. But dort is a lashon Tanchuma. It says the same concept but a different lashon. The lashon is like this. We're talking about mitzvahs kalos, light mitzvahs, she'ein bnei adam mashgichim behem, that people don't care about them. Ela shemashlichin neisetaches ikveim, but they throw it away under their heels. So when we learn the Rashi and the Tanchuma, we see there's a difference. Rashi says that we're talking about such mitzvahs which people are not so careful with. They're mezalzel. But they step on it. Step on it means it's there, but you step on it, you're not so careful about it. In Tanchum, it says you throw away the mitzvahs. You throw it under your heels means you throw it away and don't keep it at all. So the difference of the way they write it is according to Rashi, the pasuk is talking about those mitzvahs that you are not so careful with. You do them, but not so careful. And the Tanchuma says that it means mitzvahs that you throw away, you don't keep it all. That from verstehen. So the Rebbe says we have to understand. According to Rashi, we're talking about those mitzvahs a person steps on with his heels. The mensch tretet the mitzvahs, the mensch steps on the mitzvahs, which means, in other words, is mezalzel and say he is mezalzel, which means he's not careful with them. They're light in his eyes. He's moving wie das wird herausgebracht in dem Loshen Ekev. We understand how the word Ekev expresses this concept that these are mitzvahs that you're not so careful with. Why? Stepping on something is with your feet. And when you're not careful with something, you could use the Loshen, you step on it. So it has a connection to the word Ekev. That you step on it with your feet means something that is not so important to you. But according to the Medrash, that means you throw it away under your heels. Is not glatt. It's not so simple. Derech hapshat, in the way simple pshat will be. What is the connection between throwing away the mitzvah? Throwing away means das heißt, they nicht mekayim sein. It means not doing them. So tachas hakveim tach. What does it got to do with under your heels? You throw the mitzvahs. As man is nicht mekayim the mitzvahs kalos, if you don't keep the light mitzvahs, hastes it means as man var sein ganz narrow, you're throwing it away completely. Nicht nur tachas hakveim, not throwing it under the heels. When you say under the heels means it's there. So according to Rashi, makes sense. These are mitzvahs that you do, but you're not so careful, you step on it. So stepping on it means with the heels. But when you're saying you're throwing it away, what's it got to do with the heels? So why does the Torah express that in the Inyan of Ekev? That's one thing. Weiter steht im Medrash, it says further in the Medrash, this is the meaning of what David HaMelech says. There's a posik in Tilim, David HaMelech says, Kapitel Mantes, Lomo ira b'meiro, avein akeva yisubeini. Why should I be afraid in days of evil? In other words, why should I be afraid that something bad should happen to me? The only reason I'm afraid is because avein akeva yisubeini, because there are avedas of the Ekev that surround me. Which means like this. David says, as a hot nit made him in a mitzvah zachamura shebetera. He's not afraid of the strict mitzvahs of the Torah, because he knows he does them good. No, in a mitzvah zakalis, that's what he's afraid. He says, Loma ira b'meira, what am I afraid of? Avein akevai. I'm afraid, Shema varti al achas mehem. Maybe I was over, I transgressed one of the light mitzvahs. Imasisi, imleasisi. I'm not so sure, maybe I was over, maybe I did it, maybe I didn't do it. Because it's a light mitzvah, maybe I didn't do it. And he's saying that's not good. Because he says to the Eibishter, you said, you have to be careful with a light mitzvah like a strict mitzvah. So this is the pshat in the posik of David HaMelech, the way the Medrash says right after that where he says about what Ekev here means. He's not glatik, so the Rebbe says it's not so simple. Sicher is David HaMelech given upgeht in alle mitzvahs. For sure, David HaMelech was careful with all the mitzvahs, Eiche mitzvahs kalas, even the light mitzvahs. Und wie der Medrash bringt gleich da behemshech. The Medrash itself, right here, and behemshech to the drosha now, and in continuation to the pshat and the word Ekev Tishmun, where he says it means mitzvahs that you throw away, you throw it under your heels. So the Medrash says, Ados was David HaMelech zokt. This that David HaMelech says, Gam avdecha nizar behem, b'shomer Ekev rov, that your slave, your servant, was careful. And he says, b'shomram Ekev rov, by watching, keeping the Ekev rov. Maintes means the mitzvah scholars. David HaMelech was saying that I keep even the mitzvahs of the Ekev. And what is the pshat Ekev rov? Ekev rov is meramas. The Medrash says it's the word rov. Ekev rov is remes, a hint. The Medrash is mamish. The Medrash continues. From posik to a posik morav tufchash etzavanta. There's a posik rav which says it's a posik and also in Tilim. How much is rav tufcha? The many kindness, goodness of you that you hid from me. That's the schar. But that's the schar and shal mitzvah scholars. That's the schar for the like mitzvahs. So what is really David HaMelech saying in this posik? The way the Medrash says, Kam avdachon Nizar, your Eved was careful. B'shomram Ekev rov, by keeping, was careful in keeping the mitzvahs of the Ekev, like mitzvahs, and for that he expects rov. He expects the schar, which is hinted in the posik morav tufcha shvantel recha. So the posik here says, the way the Medrash explains, that he definitely was careful with the light mitzvahs. And wissentlich as avdachon Nizar, now that he knew that he was careful in these mitzvahs. Why does he say the way the Medrash says on our posik, on the posik that he brings in connection to Oya Ekev? So what did we say? The Medrash says that David HaMelech said that he said, I'm not afraid from the strict mitzvahs. I'm afraid maybe I didn't keep the light mitzvahs. So it's a contradiction. What do you mean maybe he didn't keep? He kept it. Especially the Medrash says clearly that he kept the light mitzvahs too and expected the schar for it. So it seems like a contradiction here. Is the declaring in them the explanations as follows. The Medrash reckons wegen einer was halt am Bedarf chas v'sholem nicht sein soll in mitzvahs kalos. The Medrash is not talking about a person who chas v'sholem thinks that you don't have to be careful with light mitzvahs. But kolish can nicht from mevazah the mitzvahs. We're not talking about a person. The Medrash is not talking about a person that's mevazah the mitzvahs. Has definitely is careful, and certainly he's not mevazah a threat of a certain doesn't step on them, which means he's mezalz only mevazah them. Embarrasses them. The Retman Vegnazava says, Maskim and Medarf Mekayim the mitzvahs kalos. Talking the person who agrees and says, for sure you have to keep the mitzvahs kalos. When he sich mishtadel zu Mekayim and he tries to keep them. No, that is he mashlich tachas ha'ekev. He throws them under the heel. That's another meaning here. It means legt ob ze yakiyum of speter. He pushes off the mitzvahs for later. Und noch später, even later. He's not to make it till after the heel. The heel represents the bottom, the last. So here's a person who knows I have to keep it, but he pushes it off for the end, for later. He pushes it off for later. Why does he push it off for later? Not because he thinks I don't have to keep it. He knows you have to keep it. At Tainet, he says, first you have to see that the head, what does the head mean? The things which are very strict. First, I have to make sure that the important things I should be strict with. The then mitzvahs which are not the head, which is the most strict, but things which are close to the head, which means mitzvahs known to say mitzvahs which are close to the head. The head represents the most strict ones, and then you have them not that strict, but they're pretty close to being that strict. And the person thinks, so first let me think about the important things, and at the end, I will start thinking about the Ekev, about the mitzvahs which are not so strict. Was noch weiter. Certainly at the end, he will think about hidurim, to be mahadim mitzvahs, to be extra careful, lifnim yeshuras adin, or to do more than the halacha requires. And the person time is like this. We can't only from the piyata time. You can't start with the foot. You can't start from the bottom. In other words, to start to be careful before I'm finished with being careful and strict on the more important mitzvahs. I'll start with the simple ones. As that muzan say that there has to be an order. If you go according to a seder, first you start with the very, very important things. As long as he's not finished with them, he has no reason to think about other things. Or befrat, certainly not the fnime shura sadin, to do things beyond the halacha. Mila dachsidusa, things which is not halacha, but chasimila chasdusa, which a chassid would do, which means a real frumarid would do. Ukadema simple. I can't. I first have to finish with the good, important things, then I go to that. And he gives an example that Rabbi, as mekum tzayidin, umemonta im Abbas Yisrael. You come to Yidin and you expect him to do Abbas Yisrael. And what's the pshat, the real Abbas Yisrael? As there's a libhob, mafila Yidin, was in Kemel Kentevin, you should love even a Yid that you never had any benefit from him, no favor from him. Mafila Kemel Nigazan, a Yid that you never even saw. So you tell him that's what Abbas Yisrael is. You have to love every single Yid. So he says, how could you expect him to do such a high level of Abbas Yisrael? He's not even finished. You're not even doing properly lower levels. The proof is, because even when I'm talking about a Yid that he knows, that you had a favor from him. Sometimes he stumbles, means he doesn't keep it to love that person like you love yourself. He says, I know that. Even the person that did me a favor. Certainly he doesn't suspect and doesn't say, well, maybe I even paid him back bad for the he did me good and I pay him back bad. That for sure, he says, I don't. But I know that not always I do. I really love him, even though I should really love him. So B'meila, how could you expect him to love every single Yid, even the one that you didn't know, that he never did you anything? I'm not yet in the level of loving the people I do know, the people I did do me a favor. Also, that one example was Abbas Yisrael. Another example, how could you expect him to follow the shurim of chitas, which means learn all the parasha chumash learn every day the parasha of chumash, and you see the word the ches of chumash is in italics because that's the ches of chitas. That to learn every day the parasha of chumash with Rashi. Zogen alle tog dem shir chotsh in Tilim. Say every day the shir of Tilim as it's divided to the month, and you see the sofi, the top of Tilim is also italics. Und dem shir yemi in Ta'amya, and learn the shir yemi, the daily shir in Tanya, which is the second top. So how could you expect me to do that? The Shasafra felt them all from Friedrich and Yoni. Sometimes he misses not only that, he misses some other things of davening. Things that you have to say that it says in the Siddur. The Anshak Knesset established. So let me first deal with that I have to make sure that I don't do that, I don't skip that. Then we'll think about Chita. So his taina is like this. Emes says, we're not talking about a person said, I don't have to keep it. It's true, I have to keep all these things. But halt noch nicht dabei. He says, he, meaning himself, I'm not at that level yet. At that tone, gave it a seder. He has to do and follow a seder, which means a meshach's man for a meshach for a time. He says if it's ein hergel till he gets used to it, becomes nature. Shleishim yem, at least 30 days. First for 30 days, I should stay involved in yonim ikri v'shtein Shulchan Aruch. Important things which are in the Shulchan Aruch. Zogen was the Anshe Knesset Agdelim sagen, to make sure that I say what the Anshe Knesset Agdelim the Chachomim, the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, or the first Beis Hamikdash, end of the first Beis Hamikdash. First, let's make sure that I say that. That's what they made. I have to, and I'm not so pushy. I'm not only careful in that, so I have to first work with that. And noch them only afterwards, when this whole time passes, then I'll start things with as added to Yiddishkeit later. He's in Ramo, finally with the Ramo writes. Then for a long time or a certain time, I will focus on doing what the Ramo and the other Achreinim say. Then when I finish with that, I'll start thinking about doing more than the law requires, which means he doesn't say I'm not going to keep certain things. But everything goes with the proper order. He gives an example what the person time is that you can't do the smaller things as long as you're not finished with the big things. But they were speaking once to a person that he should have Abbas Yisrael in not the way it's required, but more than it's required, more than the Torah requires. Zokter says, says, that's not an order. You can't do that. I'm not at that level yet. I'm still working on lower level. When they're hot of them, a great moshel, and there's a prepared moshel he has. And he gives an example. Ein the gate in gas, on sheikh and on a hem, the guy could walk in the street without shoes, without a shirt, etc. But I talked of a tie, aniva, he's wearing a tie. Imagine guys wearing a tie without wearing a shirt. You can't do that. After you have a shirt, then you wear a tie. Tie is the extra. Same thing he says here. I have to first get the real things. And then I'll think about the extra. So we're talking not about a person, and that's what he says the Medrash is talking about, not a person who doesn't do it. But he'll explain. He throws it away. Under means he throws it to the end. He leaves it for the end, under the heel. That's what he means. Even though if you look logically, even the logic of Kedusha, but the tanya that you said before has a place. That, like you said, devotional. You can't wear a tie without a shirt. You can't start doing with the little things, not so important things, and the extra things before you're finished in the real things. It's true. There's a place for that. So, but but the truth is, and a very important thing is, as Avedas Hashem serving Hashem has to start with amunah, faith, and accepting the yoke of Hashem. It doesn't start with cheshbenis al b'seichel. This is a seichel cheshbon. Makes sense in seichel, but that's not how you serve Hashem. You have to serve Hashem with amunah, kabbalah seil. Umitzad amunah v'kabbalah seil. When you're looking from the point of view that you have amunah deibish and kabbalah seil, is there zohir? So you're careful. Not only you, eventually you do it, but you're careful. The mitzvah kala kibachamora. In the light mitzvah, like a strict mitzvah. Und wegen der Hirische mitzvah is bei ihm mit dem ganzen Studium mit mitzvah kala. And even being careful in the mitzvah, not just that you're keeping it. It should be important to you, mamesh, like a strict mitzvah. The light mitzvah should have the same importance. Why is it? That's a strict mitzvah. This is not. So he says why. The nekuda von alle mitzvahs, the nekuda, the point of all mitzvahs, is mitzvah melosh and tzavsa b'chibur. Is that the word mitzvah means connection. Connection. Through mitzvahs, we get connected to the essence of Hashem. And that point is by all the mitzvahs gleich. They're all the same. On kein Unterschied zwischen mitzvahs chamuris and mitzvahs kalas. No difference, strict mitzvahs and light mitzvahs. Reish or the reiki, but you look at it, it's the head or the foot. The strict mitzvahs I consider the head. Simple mitzvahs I consider the foot. The heel. It makes no difference. If that's what the Eibishter wants, then you connect yourself to the Eibishter. In the minyan, when you talk about this, about the connection that a mitzvah brings a yid to the Eibishter, there's no place to think of making a seder, whether this is the top, this is the bottom. Whether it's something that the Anshe Knesset Agdela revealed, or a Talmud was a proper person, a proper Pesach, a proper tzaddik that is in the later generations. It makes no difference, because as long as you know this is what Hashem wants, because we know that if it was established by the people who, and it follows the conditions of what a chiyuv is, that means that this is what the Eibishter wants. So you connect yourself to the Eibishter no matter what. The Yetzer Hara is over Umen b'mlach. The Yetzer Hara is an expert in his job. The Rebbe talked him from der Klugenker. Friedrich Rebbe used to call him smart aleck. Klugenker means English means a smart aleck. He thinks he's smart. So since he thinks he's smart, he's coming up with ideas. So the Yetzer Hara, what the Mamsik Ventainis Mesodoros Meseder. So he came with an idea to stop a yid from doing what you're supposed to. Comes with an idea. You got to go with a seder. There is only skabel not to get past misholim in order for the person to accept what he says. So he even has a mashal, he has misholim, and it's all from the Yetzer Hara. We have to know this is the advice of the Yetzer Hara, and that's against what the Eibishter wants. That knife and Kabbalah Satero in Yiddishkeit, the condition in receiving the Torah, the condition in Yiddishkeit is Nase Kedem L'Nishma. You say I will do before you say I will understand. And the Gemara even says that there was an applicator that told, I think, Rove, that you nation it's a nation that's very fast. You're not thinking. You make decisions without even thinking, without giving some seichel to it. And he told him, you had your mouth before your ears. You said, Nasa, you said with your mouth, I'll do, before you even heard what it is. Maybe it's not going to be good. Maybe it won't make sense. Which means he says, you're not following a proper order. The order is first you hear, and then it makes sense, and then you say, I'll do it. So he said, so the applicator said that. That's Hepech HaSeder. They get opposite of Seder. And that's what the Eitzah Tainus. He doesn't realize that this is not Yiddish. Yiddishkeit, he realizes it, but he wants to show you that it's not. Go with the Seder. Yiddishkeit starts with Nasa before Nishma. Noch mehr sagt der Novi. The Novi says even more. The Pasuk in Yeshaya. Mi iver ki avdi. Who's blind? My servant. If avdi, on my servant, that zog nazer is an iver. On my servant, someone who is my servant who has Kabbalah sale, people will say this person is blind, which means if you're going to say that you have to serve Hashem like a servant works for his master, in the same say that as a servant works for his master, nicht mit Seichel nor mit Emunah Kabbalah sale. Like you should go not with Seichel but with Emunah Kabbalah sale. So if a person says that, wird man sagen, as er fühlt sich auf a blinder. He says people are going to say a blind person is like that. In other words, if you don't see what you're doing, then you do things that make no sense. And that if you are an Eved, and then they'll say this is being, as they say, it's like a blind faith, but you're blind. Al pi Seichel darf sein das Seder. According to Seichel, the Seder has to be a darf onheim mit Seichel. You have to start with Seichel. Und dennoch wird man sehen, you start with Seichel, and then you'll see how to proceed. Eib Seichel that Cheke v'deir an al pi Seichel. If you're going to start thinking in Seichel, you're going to investigate and look into it with Seichel. That's how you're going to start. Seichel wird machel sein, Seichel is nicht mastig. And sometimes you could come a conclusion. Seichel will come and tell you that you came to a point where you must be something beyond Seichel. So if Seichel will tell you that manutzen amunah, then you'll have your amunah. That's what a normal person will say. Start with Seichel. And sometimes Seichel could lead you to amunah. Seichel will come and say, you come to a point where Seichel, you must say that there must be something higher. But onheib mit amunah, but to start with amunah, that's not normal. And that's what the Yitzhar time is, and that's what a person could find it. And the Rebbe is saying, this is what the Medrash is saying, that the Pasuk here is saying about mitzvah skalas, a person, you throw it under your heel, and the kasha was, if you're throwing it away, then what's got to do with the heels? He's not throwing it away. Throwing away under heels means you're pushing it off. You're postponing it. You're postponing it for later. Why? Because you want to go up to Seichel. That's the problem. So we're talking about a person that does, but you never know. Sometimes this is what could happen. You could postpone it thinking that that'll be at the end because the last thing you have to do. And the Rebbe continues to give an example. The Rebbe the Shver, or the Tzeilt, the Friedrich Rebbe explained, told, as when the kinder from Rebbe, when the children of the daughters of the Friedrich Rebbe, and then claimed they were small, so the higher the Malamed teacher. The Malamed had gehalten, the teacher, this Malamed held, as Kinder darf man nicht erzählen wegen Nyonen Bejados von Avole. Things that are outrageous, you shouldn't teach children. You shouldn't tell children like that. Nyonen in Yiddishkeit, like Meifsim, tell them all things about miracles which are beyond nature, make no sense. Was eine nicht alpe Seichel, they don't follow Seichel. In Nyon employing was legt sich nicht in Seichel. Wondrous things that in Seichel it doesn't make any sense. So he claimed you don't teach that to children. Was is for Erwachsene, this goes for adults, was bei Nemeke, the boy, die Nyon ist alpe Seichel. Adults who understand things, Seichel. Dann können sie zukommen in Nyon, können sie zunehmen in Nyon information. Then after alpe Seichel, they can reach a level, they could even absorb things which are beyond Seichel, miracles. But by Kinder, it is normal von allereien. By children, all it is, it mixes them up. Mit sie hat gehalten der Malamed. With them, the Malamed felt, darf man reden nur in Nyon, ja, das alpe Seichel. You have to talk about Yiddishkeit, but only things that make sense. When the Rebbe Rashab, nicht beseden hat sich bewusst wegen dem Malamed Shittim, when the Rebbe Rashab found out what the shit of this Malamed is, and then bald up is, they fired him right away. Why? Because man darf onheben dafke mit der Munde the Kabbalah Seichel, nicht mit Seichel. When you start with children, you have to start things which are beyond Seichel, things which come with the Munde and Kabbalah Seichel. Don't start with Seichel. Und in Yonim am Wohnen bis Seichel darf man tun mit Kabbalah Seichel. And even the things that you do understand has to be with Kabbalah Seichel. The opposite of what the other guy said, we said before, that you have to do even things you don't understand, you have to start. Seichel has to be mechayiv that you have to do it, that you have to do beyond Seichel. So even the beyond Seichel is based on Seichel. It's the opposite. Even the Yonim of Seichel have to be based on beyond Seichel. When I say that's how a person has to do it. That's how you have to educate your children. That the Tzeilen and Kinder in Yonim information, you do have to tell children things of miracles, from Seichel, which are beyond Seichel. Those pflanzt an in sie Emunah. This implants in them the true Emunah. And the tiny that they need can say that, and when those the tiny that's not a proper order, why in the world? What's the purpose to start off with things which are very outrageous and things like that beyond Seichel, those tainis come from the Yetzer Hora, the Melozokim Vixil. Comes from the Yetzer Hora, which is known as an old king and a fool. You see the difference? Before he said the Friedrich Rebbe called him the Klugenker, the smarty one. And that's because what he thinks on himself thinks he's smart. He thinks he's going to come up with bright ideas, tell you things which make sense. And in truth, the Yetzer Hora is called Exil, a fool, because only a real fool thinks that way. Someone who's smart knows that you can't start with Seichel. And therefore, you have to know that these tainas that we're saying here comes from the Melech, Zokun, Uxil, from the fool. Now we'll understand what David HaMelech Zok, what David HaMelech says, Lo me'ira b'meiro avein hakevi yisabeni. As I made it for avein hakevi. He said, what am I afraid of? I'm not afraid, the Medrash explained, not afraid of maybe the important mitzvahs, the strict mitzvahs I didn't keep. No, I'm afraid, what about the light mitzvahs? He was afraid. And the Rebbe asked a question. That contradicts to the other part of the Medrash where it says that David HaMelech said on himself, that your Evid, myself, he means, was careful, and I kept Ekev Rov. I kept the mitzvahs of Ekev. So David HaMelech knew that he kept the mitzvahs of Ekev. And here he's saying, I'm afraid that I'm not keeping the mitzvahs of Ekev, the small mitzvahs. But now the Rebbe says, we'll understand. What David HaMelech said, when David HaMelech said that I'm kept like the mitzvahs, that's something else. Because when he said, I'm only afraid of the Avedas of Ekev, it didn't mean that I don't keep it. He says it like this. Now we'll understand what he meant. He said, I'm only afraid of the mitzvahs that are Ekev, of are not so strict. The Meir from David HaMelech is given nicht as is chas v'sholem mitzvahs kalas. He wasn't afraid chas v'sholem that he's not careful with light mitzvahs. Why not? Can't you say that? Because the other part of the Medrash says that he said clearly, I am careful with the mitzvahs of Ekev. So he knew. So he wasn't, you can't say he was afraid. Maybe he didn't keep it. He wasn't careful. So what did he mean when he said, I'm afraid of the mitzvahs of Ekev? Nor from them, he was afraid of this. As efsher mitzvahs kales, by him need the zelbe mistake in mitzvahs chamoras. That was he afraid of. He said, sure, no, he did it properly. But maybe they were not so important to him like the strict mitzvahs. And that sometimes you can't tell on yourself. I know I'm careful, but maybe deep down, not really so careful. In other words, it doesn't mean to me as much as the strict mitzvahs. It is mekayim ala mitzvahs. He keeps all the mitzvahs and he's careful. But maybe this calculation, this knowledge, ados is a mitzvah was shaykh zum rosh. Und die mitzvah zum Ekev, maybe in my mind, I am calculating and think, oh, this is a very important mitzvah. This is the head. This is not so important. So, a hashpoah of mitzvahs asiris vahidur, which Mela would be mashpia, would have an influence on how much he's mahader to do it. He keeps it and he tries to keep it to his best. But as long as in his mind he thinks he knows, after all, this is not that important, you know what will happen? This could be mashpia, that he's not that careful and not that mahader. Es is nicht gleich sein Rotz v'zoye b'mitzvah kala k'b'chamura. It says you should run to a light mitzvah like you run to a strict mitzvah. Maybe by him, he does it. He doesn't run to it so much. He's not that careful. And what did he say the way it says in the Medrash? I don't know about these mitzvahs. Asisi, aloya sisi. Did I do it or did I not do it? What does he mean with that? When the far is loya sisi. And maybe that's what he meant. I didn't do it. Not I Posha simply didn't do it. I didn't do it with the same level of ziras, the same level as the other mitzvahs. When Sidney Givenke, the boy lived my habit. Says a Loshan in Gemara that everyone has to do mitzvahs according to his best ability. And if you don't do mitzvahs according to your best ability, you're lacking in the kima mitzvahs. Could be that the same way you did it, someone else will do it the same way. It can be considered top, because for him it's a top. But if you could do it better, it's not. The Gemara says, like a person who gave a lot of tzedakah, later something bad happened to him. The Gemara says, if he gave so much tzedakah, how could that happen? And he gave more than most people. The Gemara says, but maybe it wasn't. This is the Gemara here. Come on, the boy of the Mavid. Maybe he didn't do it as much as he could have. So David HaMelech was afraid. I know I keep all the mitzvahs. And I even keep the mitzvahs which are Ekev. He said, B'shomram Ekev, bro. He said, clearly I keep it. Nevertheless, he was afraid maybe his approach to it, maybe he's feeling, maybe in his mind, he does have the calculation that this is not as important, and B'meila does affect the way he does it. So, and he titled, what did he say? Loshen, when he said, Lo ma'ira b'mei ra, what am I afraid of in the time of ra, of bad? I'm afraid of Avein Akevei, of the Averis of the Ekev. So he says like this. What did he mean? The Mei Ra, gate of the days of bad doesn't really mean bad. It means time when things go just according to nature. Now, when things go according to nature, things are bad. Was Eden seinen Kiefsachas when Shivin Zevin. Eden are like one sheep among 70 wolves. But mainly, if things go according to nature, it's bad. Because naturally, it's the way the Medrash says, naturally, the Eden couldn't exist. Because imagine one sheep among 70 wolves will never live. So we Eden can't live naturally. So it's a bad time, nature. Because I feel in from Parnose, even some things, not just dangerous situations, just for a yid to make a livelihood, to make a living. In like the Rabbi said, in Golas time, for a yid to make a living is mamish like a nest that in the midbar it came down, food came down from heaven. Means Hashem obviously did it clearly. So the same thing is with Parnose by yid in time of Golas. Because of the hardships of the times, the Trat is Mad Golas, especially in Golas, kum Parnose b'shlemus. A person who has complete Parnose, it is something higher than Teve. And therefore, b'shas ha'id ma'chashbeinas b'teira was is min hashemayim. For Reish Ekev. So when he goes into Inyonim of Teira, and Teira is min hashemayim, but he looks at it that there is a difference between Reish and Ekev, which means he goes according to the Seichel and he goes according to these limitations. There's a big problem with it. Because in order for it to exist, has to be the Eibishter has to be with him higher than nature, because nature won't work. So he himself also has to follow the ways of higher than nature. And if he follows the ways of nature, when it comes to Yom Torah, which Torah is min hashamayim, which is beyond nature, and if he goes according to Seichel and according to nature, with the limitation of nature, he said the Eibishter in heaven will behave with him down here the same way, according to the limitations of the nature. And what happens then? God forbid it could become b'meiro. So when he says b'meiro, what am I afraid of? In the Meira, and Yemeira means the time when you go up Teva, when you go up Yakbola, you go up Seichel, that's a bad thing. That's the problem. So what is the thing against it that shouldn't be B'meira? So what did the David Melech say? I'm afraid, maybe when it comes to the mitzvahs of Ekev, I'm not really that careful. It means the way to avoid the Meira is if you are careful in the Ekev mitzvahs the same way as in the strict. Because in order to avoid the Meiro, it has to be L'mayla Nateva. Derech HaTeva, it can't exist. It has to be higher in nature, higher in limitations. You have to behave higher in limitations. Which way do we see as higher in limitations? If the stricter mitzvahs are stricter in your mind, and the lighter ones are lighter, that's not higher in nature. That's normal. That's Seichel. That's normal Seder. That's nature. That won't get you. Because if you follow nature, Chas v'sholem, the Eibusher will do nature with you too. But when you don't make these cheshbeinos, all he cares is that I do the right thing. I'm connected to the Eibishter. Mit atzmus hus ein sof baruch hu, the unlimited etzem hus of the Eibishter. B'meile is by him the ganze Sturm from Mesiras Nefesh and Kabbalah Seil from an Eved du Ben zum Eibishter. So he has the full storm, the full strength of his Mesiras Nefesh and his Kabbalah Seil of an Eved. And of a ben, Abed has his milas and his son has his milas, and he has that same connection to the Eibishter. Saiven tut a mitzvah was is verbunden mit Reish. Whether he does a mitzvah which is verbunden with the head, which is the top important things. Sai mit Ekev, or even when he does things in Ekev, all the same. Abir verbindet sich mit Atmas und Hus, as long as he knows he's connected to the Eibishter, it's all the same. Then fühlt man sich mit Tim Eich Azem Maila. So then the Eibishter Maila will also behave to him. So that's the antidote to the Yemei Ra, to have the bad days, which means nature, which automatically makes you bad, is if you behave not nature, you make sure that you're careful, not careful to do the simple mitzvahs. That for sure. To do it the same way, to feel about it the same way, to have the same feeling that it's all is connected to the Eibishter. Und dann darf nicht mehr verkehren sein. Then you don't have to be afraid of anything. That's what David HaMelech said. Lama ira b'meiro. Why should I be afraid in the bad days? I have nothing to be afraid of. Why? If I will do the Ekev, the only thing I'm afraid, maybe I didn't do Ekev, so I have to be afraid. But otherwise, I wouldn't have to be afraid. Why is it nothing to be afraid of? Since if your approach is that way, that it's all the same because it's all the Rotzen of the Eibishter, you connect to the Eibishter, so he's mekusha to the Etzem of the Eibishter. And the Eibishter is doch meshel v'shel tefalz, and the Eibishter controls everything in the world. Keilel keposhet, for sure, and simple. Hanogas hateva. He controls the nature. But Mele is Godel Harei, Shemer Sakipsa. So the shepherd, Eibishter is a shepherd, for sure will protect the sheep. If it goes according to nature, we're one sheep amongst 70 wolves. That's Yimeirah. Bad things can happen. But the Eibishter, who's beyond nature, controls the nature. So who cares that naturally you're in trouble? The Eibishter controls it. But when was the Eibishter control the beyond nature? If you behave beyond nature. But if you behave beyond nature, the Eibishter will do it. When versorgt and the Eibishter takes care and supplies, so to speak, the sheep, which is the Yidden, it says, you will make me lay in the fields of grass. You will make me go on water of menucha. You will lead me. You'll have all the greatest things. And this all will happen. The Eibishter will give. The Eibishter will give children and life and proper livelihood to everyone, every man and every woman. But that's all because of behaving in a form that the Ekev is. So before we finish, just look back at the beginning of the Sikha. The Shaila was, according to the Tanchuma, that it means that you throw away the light mitzvah. So what does it got to do with the heel? So the Rebbe said that's not the pshat. When the Medrash says it's not throwing it away and not doing it, throwing it under the heel means doing it, but doing it as a lesser level. And that's what the Medrash means. And that's like under the heel means. At the bottom is the last, you leave it for the end. And the second Shaila, it's a contradiction. David HaMelech says he doesn't know if he did the mitzvahs of Ekev. And the same Medrash continues, he says, Gam that you do it. So the Rebbe answers, it's not a contradiction. He definitely did it. His question was, what was his approach to it? What was his feeling to it? Was it all the same to him with the same hidur? But it's all based, it was the same thing, that there's no difference what it is, as long as we know that's what David is happy with, you do it. That's what it's supposed to, and that's what David HaMelech was afraid of. But if you have Ekev, but if you have do the mitzvahs of Ekev, then the Eibishter will give you everything. What will happen? The Svet Zokt in the Parsha, it comes like the Parsha says, V'hoyo Ekev Tishmon. You will listen to the mitzvahs of Ekev. And what will be, the Medrash says in Beishis Rabbah, V'hoyo is Loshen Simcha. V'hoyo is used many times for happiness. You'll be happy. And Ekev Tishmon means Ekev Tishmon. Tishmon, the mitzvahs from Ekev. You will keep, you will listen, you will follow the mitzvahs of Ekev, of the heel, punkt with the mitzvahs shel Rosh. Exactly the same, the mitzvahs of the head. And what happens then? So the pasuk says, V'hoyo Ekev Tishmon, you'll be happy, and you will listen even to the mitzvahs of Ekev in the same way as you listen to the more strict mitzvahs. Is V'shomer Havai l'kech l'chor sabris, the Eibishter will keep for you this covenant that he made. Nesver nimshech al hashpos tevis, and all the great hashpos will be nimshach, will be given to the Yidden. And you see, Ha'ara 31, it says, look before, in the end of Siv Beis, there he says that the Medrash says, Ekev Rov, that for doing the mitzvahs of Ekev, you get the Rov. What's Rov? So that refers to the posture, Rav Tufcha Shetzavanta, the many good that they wish to hit for us. That's the Rebbe is using that same thing here. That if we have this, we have the mitzvah of Ekev, you will have all the ashpoyos, was the posuk rechanturis that the posuk is mentioning, and that's hinted in the word Ekev Rov. It's get the hashpoyos, and the posuk continues, V'aheivcha, I love you, V'rachacho, and I'll bless you, V'yibecha, I'll multiply you, Baruch Tiyeh, Mekolam, you will bless the whole nation, etc., etc. B'korev Mamesh, and in the future, and very soon, what's going to be not stam these brachas, but Al Adom Hashem Nishbel V'secha V'asel, the posuk on the land that David swore to your forefathers to give you. That means not only we'll have the brachas, but the main thing is we'll have the brachas in Eretz Yisrael, that David will bring Mashiach and take us to the Geula Shleima.